Measure a double wing pallet. So we start by measuring the overall dimensions of the pallet. Always your stringer is your first dimension, which is 48. And then we're going to measure the widest part of the pallet, which is your top board or your bottom board in this case, which is 42. So this is a 48 by 42 pallet. The next question is it single faced or double faced? We know because it has top and bottom boards that it's actually double faced. Next question is it a two-way or a four-way? Because there are no notches in the stringer and there's no way to enter it from the side, we know that we can only enter it from two sides, front and back, so it becomes a two-way. And then reversible simply means that the top of the pallet is identical to the bottom of the pallet. That does not apply, so I'm just going to cross that out. From the overall dimensions, we move to the stringer measurements. First thing I'm going to do is count how many there are. We know there's 1, 2, 3. So I'm going to write down there's 3 stringers. The thickness, I'm going to start at the 1, and we're going up to 2 1/4. So we know 2 1/4 minus the 1 that we're starting at gives us 1 1/4. I'm just going to double check my work a little bit. Again, 2 1/4. So minus the 1 gives us 1 1/4. So these pallets are 1 1/4 wide by, I'm going to measure the height next. The easiest way to do that is to just push on the top board and measure. I'm just confirming that they're 3.5, which is standard, and they are. So they're 1 1/4 by 3.5, and there are 3 of them. Thickness again was 1 1/4 by 3.5 by, your length never changes on the stringers. That's always your first number. So I'm just going to carry that down to the 48. If you needed to confirm, you can remeasure that as you go. From the stringers, I'm going to move to the top deck. First thing I'm going to do is count how many there are. Make sure they're all the same size, and they are. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I'm going to write down 8 before I forget it. And then I'm going to move to the thickness. Again, the best way to do this on the thickness, because it's so critical, is to start at the 1. It is like 3/8 on the nose. So I'm going to measure another one just to make sure that's what I'm getting. 3/8 looks pretty good. I'm going to measure one more just to make sure. I'm kind of debating, should I write down 3/8 or should I write down 7/16? And this one looks to me a little bit heavier. So I'm stuck between 3/8 and 7/16. Let me just do one more to kind of see what we're trying to go for. I'm going to go with 7/16 because if you can look at this tape measure, it looks like it's slightly over the 3/8. Some of them were right on the 3/8, but I think overall 7/16 is what we're shooting for. And that's why I measure a couple different ones just to know kind of what are we going for. 7/16 is your thickness then that we're going with. And now we need the width. So I'm just going to measure a couple widths. When you see 3 3/8, not quite 3.5, in the industry, the cants are getting smaller and smaller because the grade market is totally getting, they're taking more of the tree because they can get more money for it. So our cants that used to be full 4 are getting smaller and smaller. So that's why we're seeing the 3 3/8. It was just cut out of a smaller cant, but we know they're going for 3.5, which is standard. So I didn't want you to alarm you. You can write down 3 3/8 if that makes you feel better, but we know that 3.5 and 5.5 are your standards in the industry. So I'm just going to write 3.5. And then your second digit is always the length of your boards, but we can confirm that real quick just to make sure. Again, that we are at 42. So that's right on. Okay, now we're going to move to the bottom. They're all the same width, so I can just go ahead and start counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bottom boards. We'll measure the thickness again. Again, I think we're going for the 7/16. I can tell right out of the chute because it's not quite 3/8, it's not quite 1/2 inch, it's right in between, which is 7/16. So I'm going to write down again 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bottom, 7/16. Just confirming the standards that we already know. They should be one or the other. Most cases, 3.5. Slightly under, as we know, but we're just going to stick with the standards. And then the overall length is your last digit, which is the 42. So that would go in here. And if you're using this worksheet, it's good because it'll help you not miss anything on the pallet. So is it flush? No, it's not flush, because if it was flush, the stringers and the deck boards would all line up and we'd be able to go like this and touch all parts. This is considered not flush. So we move to the next thing. Is it a single wing? Well, no, because if it was a single wing, we would only see the top board or the bottom board hanging over the stringer, and the other board, top or bottom, would be flush, meaning it would end right here at the stringer and be flush. There wouldn't be this piece hanging over. But since both of them are hanging over, we know that that is considered a double wing. So now we need to measure it. If you push on your tape measure when you're measuring out to the board, you can see that we're ending at 1.5 inches. So adding these two together, we would write down 3 inches if we're going to add them together, or if you want to say 1.5 on each end, which is what I like doing. I don't know why, but that's how I do it. 1.5 inches on each side, or you can call it a 3-inch single wing, but you need to make sure you know what measurement that is. That's why taking a picture is always helpful, so that when you go back to the office, you can kind of remember what you did while you were out there. The next thing for us to look at is nails, staples, or their clinch staples. We go to the front of the pallet. These are all nails. So we're just going to mark the box that says nails. Clipped corners, we're going to check the corner. Is the corner square on top and bottom? Absolutely. So there's no clipped corners. If it was clipped, we would see a piece of the board totally cut. And sometimes it can be as much as like part of the stringer that's cut, but the corner would not be there. It would not be square. This would be missing. So clip corners, no. Chamfered lead edges, that's typically inside the pallet when you're trying to get equipment in and the bottom board's super thick. They'll actually take a section of this pallet and they'll just saw it down so it's thinner, so that the rollers of the equipment can enter the pallet to pick it up. That's not the case here, so we'll skip that. And we're going to go down to identification. Is there any stencil, color code, or stamping of any sort? And that can mean heat treat or any kind of weird stamp. No, no stencil. I don't see a color code. I'm going to check both stringers, and there's no stencil over here either. So don't have to worry about this. This doesn't apply. I can put NA just so I know I saw it, or I can just leave it blank, however you like to work. If there's any special instructions or comments that you wanted to note, here's where you would do that. If there was anything weird that you wanted to note here or sketch out, anything that you think you might forget and you're not allowed to take a picture, this would be a great place to do that. The next question would be, does the customer take a flatbed or a van? A van is your semi. A flatbed is typically used when there are no docks and you're unloading in a yard or a parking lot or somewhere in their plant where there's no docks available. In this case, the customer said they take a box trailer, so I'm going to mark that. Box trailers typically rear were unloaded. If it's a flatbed, they could unload from the side or the rear. You can mark that here. Going down to banding. Does the customer, you're gonna ask the customer, do you have your pallets banded? They're gonna say yes or no. Are they full stacks or half stacks? Meaning, do you do them in 10 or do you do them in 20 or 11 and 22? Here's where you would mark that. My customer said he likes them in full stacks, and only the last 4 stacks are banded on the truck. And why that is the size of the pallet, sometimes they'll shift and transport, or if your mill is really far away or in the middle of West Virginia and you're going up and down hills, a lot of times the load will shift. So when they open the doors, the pallets come flying out. Some cases you'll see they'll want the last 4 stacks banded because of those scenarios. Then your next question would be, do you prefer metal or plastic? Is there a preference? My customer said plastic, it's better for the environment. So I'm gonna mark that down. And then I know when I send this out for quoting that I have all of the information that I need in regards to the banding, the color code, the measurements, etc.